Terry. I know we're here to talk to you about your career in the arts. We've got lots of questions here to ask you, and I'm sure you've got some answers prepared for us. So
As
we'll just
always.
throw up a softball pitch right here.
All right.
Just tell us what your title is, what you do, where you work, how long you've been there.
Okay, so I have been involved with the community theater overall in Athens for over 2 decades, but we
Wow.
don't need to do that as a mathematical thing. Um, Here with Athens Clarke County, I started 17 years ago with them and did everything from the contract labor to the theater assistant to then taking over approximately, I guess it's 14 years now, 14, 15 years that we would be in this position.
Wow.
So,
Awesome. So tell us exactly what a day looks like in your life. I know you wear a lot of different hats, so each day looks a little bit different. But try to unpack that for us.
yeah, I wish I looked good in all those hats, but um, as we were talking before we went on air with this, I'm one of those rare breeds, and it's not a this kind of thing as much as it was just I was so fascinated by every single facet. So as a director, obviously I have a different set of obstacles, visions, responsibilities, duties, and organizational things that have to happen. But I also do the lighting design. Very involved in the schematics. I generally do a primitive schematic for every show before I hand it off to the scenery artist, simply because I also used to do scenery artistry. So for me, and some mechanical drafting. So for me, it's very much just a natural part of my background, simply because I just was so totally immersed in all of the facets of the theater production. I've done everything from cleaning the toilets to baking the brownies for concessions to, wrangling cats like Jello backstage with children. I am an actress, a stage director, stage manager, running crew chief, prop mistress, master, the whole ball, every gambit that you can do from top to bottom, I have been. So, like when we were talking before, so program specialist is what the title is according to the government grade. But it would be executive managing and artistic director because it encompasses everything from both right and left hemisphere approaches, because you have to have the business acumen in the background for budgeting, for setting up shows to be able to project a season, not only financially, but also with all of the institutional knowledge that you have to have of your own particular venues that you work out of, so that you have a solid basis and understanding of the resources that you can draw on, where typically I pull my Rob from Peter, pay Paul kind of thing. Not financially. I don't want the ACC, because it's their money. It's government money, but it's community money. It's the citizens' money.
Right.
But what I mean by that is I know what I have in my stable of resources, so I know where I need to throw the most money and the most, not the most creativity, because every project will require that, but the most resources from every spectrum, because you have to be so spherical as a director, especially in this position, because there are a staff of 2 and an eighth, kind of.
Right.
So we are spread so thin and we have so much to accomplish. So you have to have that spherical knowledge of everything that you have, everything that you can then tweak, recreate, retool, reinvest, bring in additional items. And you have to be mindful of the escalating costs within the industry for all of those things, whether they
Right.
simply be we have several props here on the tables or whatever, just the simple fact of a gel. Is this a show that requires excessive that? Or do you have enough LED lighting to accomplish what it is you want? And then what is the venue that you're working out of? What is the size of stage? So how many people are in the script? And all of that are equations that have to be figured out before you ever come to the table or set the table for a season. So in as much as people like to think that, we sit back on our duffs and simply bark orders from afar. Yes, Noah. It's not. There's so much intellectual gymnastics that goes into everything before you, even as a technical director, before I even have a conversation with you about a show, I have already spent maybe 2.5 to 3 months just internally digesting everything from every single angle.
Right.
And that includes, not only picking the show which is appropriate for the season, which is appropriate maybe for the social climate. There's so many different variables, both inside and outside the industry, that have to be considered, especially for this position because we are government sponsored.
Right.
That we have a responsibility to be good stewards, not only of our money, but of the materials that we choose and select to showcase.
Right.
So I know that was kind of all over everywhere, but when you talk about wearing different hats, you really have to go to every
facet of that.
every little
Right.
cubby that has a responsibility that you're responsible for, and it may be, something minor. But all of those pieces have become the mosaic of the major, which is the final vision and everything, which then you have to translate to everybody else as
Right.
clearly and as articulately as you possibly can in order for everything to come to fruition.
Awesome. So you've mentioned that you have to wear a lot of hats. Let's go back just to put on your director's hat for a moment, and talk to me a little bit about how you make casting decisions, and what are those major considerations once you've gone through, picked a show, or are you already beginning to precast the show in your mind when you pick it based off what you know of the actors that are available in this area? What are the major considerations when you do casting for a show?
Selection of a show is extremely important. I myself personally, I'm just going to be really honest up front. My husband always says, don't say that. But I have a passion for the classics because I see generations, and unfortunately I have to put S's on that as plural, which tells you how long I've been around. But there are so many younger individuals who have never been exposed to these classics, and they're so wonderful, and they have such depth. There is, in some sense, a naivete about a lot of the classics, but how beautiful is that? In the sense that the material and the content of the show. So first you have to be mindful of what shows you select according to number one, the stable of actors. I don't always like to say, you don't necessarily precast, but I'm not going to lie. There are some characters that their personality archetypes absolutely scream for the necessary individual. And as in life, it's, you wouldn't fall in love with a pet or your spouse or whatever. You have to fall in love with the character. And so if you already know that there's a quantitative number of people who could deliver that character, it makes me feel better going into a production to think that I know that I'm not always dealing with unknown variables. Of course, I love the opportunity when people walk in off the street who I've never met, such as like in The King and I.
Right.
Where I got to tell you, I was down to the last minute sweating bullets on Anna because the character obviously is a principal, that's not the point, whether it's a lead or not, but it's so pivotal to the story. And it wasn't as though we didn't have a parade of God knows how many women coming in, and most of them were younger women. And I just remember I said a small prayer. I said, "Dear Lord, I need a woman. I need an adult. I need somebody who's lived long enough to understand what actual regret is. I need somebody who understands the depth of a heartache, and not just of being brokenhearted by someone where love didn't work out for some reason, but that love could have worked out and that was stolen from you." And you don't get that kind of depth or that kind of richness from someone who hasn't lived long enough to experience that. So casting, I've always been complimented by audience members on, I could not have seen anyone else in this role, or your casting was impeccable. And I very much appreciate the fact that they appreciate how much intent goes into the selection. Because if I have cast people in positions where I have come to them and said, after they have auditioned, not prior to, but knowing that in their heart that they really see themselves as this particular character. So what's another case in The King and I? And it was an individual who has a beautiful singing voice, who has just, rich, just tons of texture in their character and their personality. But there was something about the way they carry themselves that I said, I hate to do this to you, but I'm going to make you not like the bad guy, but And they were, I didn't audition for that part. I said, I know you didn't audition for that part. I said, but I'm telling you, there is a part of you that I think is untapped that you don't even know that there's a reserve there. I said, so this will give you, number one, an opportunity to stretch your muscles as an actor, which I think deep down inside you are, you're begging for. On the flip side of that, you could very comfortably do this other, and that's great, but I don't want you in a cakewalk. I want you in a vice where emotionally you have to torment and tear yourself apart in order to understand what this character is feeling. And I think the simple process of doing that and then revealing that as raw and as pure as you can on stage will put you in a completely different dimension as an actor, where at the end of the day you will walk away emotionally exhausted, but you know that you will have done the best at your craft, and you will have achieved a different level for yourself. So not only does the audience walk away as greatly as impacted as they should be, but you yourself walk away in awe of your own talent and your own ability that until this point has not been tapped because no one saw something before in you. I said, so casting shows is an art. It's an art. It's not always going to the same person who, can always hit the home run out of the park. It's taking the person who's never been up to bat and going, Babe Ruth, point. That's your star. That's where you're going to be. 12 weeks from now, you will be beyond that. And you will look in the mirror and say, there's no way I could have ever have dreamt of being that person. And yet I became that person. So it's just, I'm very much a people person, even though I talk a lot, which I do.
We both do, it's fine.
But I listen and I watch and I observe. And you pick up on personality traits and archetypes, and you know where you can tap reserves. And so that's the part as a director I absolutely love, because you get to not only show the audience something completely different, but you get to take the actor on a journey that they were too afraid to take themselves on. And sometimes it's just by virtue of your faith as the director that they get to the end of that journey and are able to go, I made it.
Challenge accepted.
Right.
That being said, you kind of dovetailed into another question. So casting, the act of the audition is where those decisions are made. So talk to me a little bit about, what catches your eye in an audition? Obviously, you shared that one story. Person came in, auditioned for one role, but you saw something in that person, and you were able to pull them to the side and not really talk them into it, but show them the advantage of taking on a challenge. So, what catches your eye in an audition when somebody walks in the door and they're coming into audition for a part? Talk a little bit about that process and what's going on in your head when somebody steps onto the stage and auditions.
All right. So auditions are interesting because as an actor, you make the assumption that your audition begins when you get to center stage and you know, get yourself squared away, and you either have your script or you don't have your script, you don't, whatever. And that, if you're a keenly intuitive director, your audition happened before you entered the theater. It's what I see of you in the hallway. It's what I see of you on your way to the bathroom, coming out of the bathroom. It's how I watch you interact with other people before you have to even interact with me. Because face it, I mean, this is not an intimidating face. I'm sorry, it's not. Like I always say, I'm that short woman in Publix on aisle 4 who goes, I can't reach the coffee. Could you?
Please, kind
So
sir.
yes. So I don't think I'm overtly intimidating. I think the position is intimidating. And you always have to respect that. I just as a very quick sideway, I remembered that in a previous position, I had to remind another director of that. I said, you do not understand the power that you wield within somebody's life. And I said, because what you say, what you do, how you respond to them makes or breaks them internally for not just stage presence, but presence in life. I said, so you have to be cognizant of that as you make your decisions in all of your casting and how you direct and whatever. I said, because you can either cure or scar someone very, very easily. And I've watched the damage to people done by directors that were insensitive, and I've seen the cures that can happen by directors who are smart enough to avoid minefields that they didn't have to go through. But anyway, so getting back to the audition itself, the audition for me begins well before that. But I like to just talk to them a little bit ahead of time because, everybody walks in, and even people who have known me for years will go, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. And I'm like, oh my God, it's just me. Like, if we were standing out in the hallway and I had my infamous green cup of coffee, which I don't have with me, uncharacteristically, I said, you would just be you.
Right.
So now, if you will allow me, let me tell you the other you I need you to be. And so I think with given enough instruction and whatever, and then there's sometimes something that they just bring to the table themselves that you go, that's interesting. Case in point, auditions for Cinderella. Everybody always assumed that the stepsisters were younger, right? And so they just had a plethora of college, fodder coming through. And I had one individual that had auditioned that I dearly, dearly just fell in love with their take on one of the stepsisters. But I knew that in order to pull that off, I had to have that twin, Mm-hmm. In order to make that happen, I had to find the other perfect for the chemistry. And it was so funny because several people into it or whatever, then another person came in who was very much thinking that they were auditioning for the mother role because they were older, not nouveau. And so I let them read for that, and that was all well and good and fine. But inside, I had no patience for that because I was like, I don't need that. So I asked for them to read for one of the stepsisters. And it was the funny part where they're trying on the shoes. And instinctually, she did everything but, and I thought, okay, if you were willing to be that ridiculous, pretending to jam your foot into a shoe that is way too small for you, and then continued by hopping across the stage and smiling and whimpering at the same time. And I thought, if you are willing to humiliate yourself at this level, this is awesome, because this is what you need.
This is awesome.
Because comedy is instinctual. You cannot teach comedic timing. I don't care what anybody says. It's one of those things where you are either born with it or you are not. It's not a mechanic. It's not a if you do number one, you can advance to number two. It's not. It's a field thing. You have to understand comedic timing. And there's chemistry. And one of my mantras in life is you never mess with chemistry. And of course, you never mess around without chemistry. And so I apply that to the casting thing as well. And so then I put these two people together. And between the two of them, I was having so much fun. I was laughing. I was like, well, you can just send everybody else home. But they were wonderful. So it's about them exploring themselves, the level of the character, almost the more ridiculous. I always tell people, I would rather have to pull you back from the ledge of insanity than to push you to the precipice.
Yeah, give me more than I need.
Yes. And always remember, just make these characters your own. Yes, they come with a template and they come with a margin. I will let you know when you've crossed the border into non-Terry land. Okay? But as long as you stay within the border of insanity, so to speak, really just give me everything you've got. And it's, at the end of the day, it's like God. I will ferret out what's necessary and what is not. I'm not saying I'm God. I'm just saying, bring everything to the character that you possibly can.
Right.
And some people, they just have that absolute gregariousness about them that just speaks, volumes to a myriad of characters. And then that's when it becomes difficult, and you have to go, are you better suited for this? Are you better suited for that? Do I save this in reserve? Do I exploit this? So it's just, casting and auditions are different. I would tell any actor, do your homework, know what the storyline is. Absolutely. Don't walk in and go, I YouTubed this like 2 times in the car. Great. I'm sure Shakespeare would be impressed. Know your story. At least know the character that you're going for, because I don't expect you to know everything. That's not your job. That's my job. And if I do my job well, you will never have to know every character, but by the time we're finished, you will. You will understand every character and every intimate relationship within an entire show.
Sounds to me it's like having a willingness to explore. These examples that you've given, these were obviously people who were comfortable going on a journey. Let me zoom back out just a little bit.
Sure.
So we talked about casting, auditioning, those things kind of dovetail together. Let's come back out and let's talk about how you select the show to begin with, and then how you slot different shows and piece those together to form a season. What does that process look like?
Pretty much depending on, we're fortunate that we are allowed to do a huge main stage musical in this space, which is absolutely wonderful. And then we have the second stage, the smaller, in the black box. And so show sizes themselves will always be tailored to the venue,
Right.
first and foremost. But if you have the space, if you have the accoutrement to work with, that dictates shows. So I look first and foremost, like I told you before, love the train in the background. I choose the classics that I wish to share, things that bring me joy, things that make me smile. I cannot direct a show that I myself do not love. In like token, there are shows that I absolutely love that I have yet to do. But in the selection, I try to choose shows that, number one, I think the community can invest in, not only emotionally, but obviously this is a fiscal investment for them as well. But something that gives back to them in essence, they have provided me with the money to purchase a gift that I then bequeath back to them. So I have to be cognizant of the fact that I am spending their money. So what do I want to bring them? Shows that have some sort of moral binding, some sort of, redeeming quality. I absolutely love comedy. Comedy is part of who I am, but I also have an extremely serious side, which a lot of people don't see very often, maybe better for them. And there are shows, the smaller shows allow me that outlet. So for the main stage musicals, I pick the things that I love. I'm not gonna lie, I just pick what I love to do. For the second stage, the smaller, where I have the opportunity of working with more adult actors and sometimes more seasoned actors, I'm allowed to do what I call the more meaty pieces. Like, I had been dying for years to do Who's a Virginia Wolf, and I just did not find the right pair until I did. And then it was beyond magic. Even in the audition, I was breathless. I realized I had actually stopped breathing. If you can take me there, if you can remove walls, if you can remove floors, if you can remove chairs. So big season, big main stage musicals are more for the family. The classics, share those, distribute those. Smaller stage is where I get to do with the more serious work, where actors get to do not only their thing to the best level that they can, but as a director, I have to be incredibly inventive, because I have to lead them to those dangerous places that make them vulnerable. And so when I do it, I also have to think, like I said, spherically, because you have to then think of resourcing. Okay, so if I'm building a set for this show, can I then tweak the materials that I have on this set, maybe with paint and changing doors and doing this? But how can I take something that's set, keep the basics of it, and yet completely twist it so that you don't feel like you walked into a similar set?
Right.
And that way I can save money. And plus I'm a scavenger at heart.
I can attest to that.
Yes, you can. Yes. Unfortunately, many people can attest that.
But that's
people
not
at
a
the
bad
end of their
trait.
driveways. But that is all part of it, because, I will see something and I will go, oh my God, I need that. And people will go, what are you doing? I say, well, I knew, such as, when I found the front end of a car
I was going to mention that. That's my favorite one.
I had mentioned that I had been wanting to do Leaving Iowa for several years, and I needed the front end of a car. And it was funny because that very afternoon, then I walked out of the theater and then was walking through the parking deck. And as I went through, not that I, this sounds terrible, but sometimes I cut through the garbage area, and there was the front end of a Taurus sitting there, and I went, thank you, God.
I remember the
And
day
I
that
brought
bumper
it
got drug
immediately
into the
back
office.
because I had told you. I simply asked for it, and if the good Lord is wanting me to do this show, for some reason these things simply appear at the end of people's driveways, in the garbage section of a parking deck, whatever it is. And I walked back through the door and I showed you the front end of that vehicle, and you were like, my God, what are you doing? And I went, I told you I needed this for Leaving Iowa. And of course, and then I chucked it in my office. So planning a season is about not only looking forward to the materials that you have, but also keeping in mind the kind of sets that are required, and so that you can tweak, so that you basically take a season where you go, when I'm finished with this here, I can reuse it over here, but after I've repainted it, reshaped it, this, and no one will never know it was this.
Exactly.
So I spread. You'll see materials from different shows, and you go, wait, wasn't that a thing in the what? No, okay. So yes.
But it brings a sort of continuity, maybe on a subliminal level.
Not just that, but I grew up in a family of 10. So hey, I'm just a scavenger by sheer
Nature.
Yeah, I think that when you're just that far down in the middle of a pack, man, you learn
You
how
become
to.
resourceful.
Yes, extremely resourceful as a matter of survival, as a matter of whatever. And so I just squirrel things away, knowing that it may be 5 years from now, but by God, I will use it. And my husband, it drives my husband insane. He's like, "Why? What are you doing with that?" I said, "I need that." And he said, "For what?" And I go, "I'm not sure yet."
I can say without context, it looks like a little bit of a bizarre behavior, but once we've worked together for a couple of years now. I'm not as surprised now as I used to be when I first
Yeah,
started
no,
working with
it's
you.
not hoarding.
Not at all.
It's not hoarding at all. What it is, it's intentionally going, if I can get this for free now, why would I pay something 3 years from now when I'm going to use it? So I've literally, and poor Jeremy, who, is, works for ACT, he does our scenery and stuff like that. I just bring things into the shop and he goes, "Why?" I go, "A year and a half from now, you're going to go, oh my God, thank you. I didn't have to build this." So he's always in perpetual fear of when I say, "Jeremy, I have something. I found something.
I have something for you.
I did a thing." So, but that's what it is you plan a season. Sometimes there's a subliminal theme to something that even I don't recognize until I'm halfway through the season, and I went,
Oh, that makes sense.
I don't know whether that makes me good or that just makes me off the charts. But
Serendipity.
either which way, I'm going to take it and make it a positive. Always turn it for the positive.
Right. That's awesome.